G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Look at this. Barnaby Joyce, candidate for New England, did not show up for the ballot to determine where he stood on the ballot paper. The Christian Democrats candidate Richard Stretton drew first place on the ballot, while former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce was in the middle of the pack at number 7. Mr. Joyce avoided the ballot draw, preferring instead to continue campaigning across the electorate, working on winning one vote at a time. That's what it says. Above this, Joyce boycotting debates. The New South Wales Teachers Federation is organising a forum in Armidale next Tuesday night, but don't expect Nationals candidate Barnaby Joyce to be there or at any public debates. A senior Nationals member of Mr. Joyce's campaign team confirmed the former Deputy Prime Minister would not be participating in any public forums or debates due to the number of, quote, out-of-towner candidates. If they're serious about the election, which we don't think they are, they will be up here campaigning all the time, not just for these one-off events. Instead, Mr. Joyce will be hitting the road and talking to voters on their terms, because he's far more interested in listening to voter concerns than the views of out-of-towners. That is the official story. That's what's being put about for the consumption of the sheeples, the National Party welded on loyalists. Same article. It says the Tamworth Business Chamber will hold a Meet the Candidates Forum on Monday, November 20 at Tamworth Town Hall, and is encouraging people to submit their questions. Well, as it happens, a bit under a month ago, on Saturday the 20th of October, the Sydney Saturday Telegraph had a front page story about all of the terrible things that Tony Windsor's media office was putting about poor old Barnaby, bringing his private life and a crisis that's been going on there within into the public realm. How tragic, how terrible, said the Telegraph on the front page. None of this has been reported anywhere in New England. The ABC hasn't touched it. The Glen Innes Examiner hasn't touched it. The Armidale Express, the Inverell Times. No, nobody's touching any of that. Tamworth Daily Leader. No. Why would anybody talk about that? Barnaby Joyce, the Catholic. Barnaby Joyce, the family values candidate. Barnaby Joyce, the voice of the moral majority. Barnaby Joyce, who surprisingly suddenly shut up and went absolutely zip-mouthed for the entire same-sex marriage postal survey. Why would that be? There we go. Barnaby Joyce, not looking very happy, is he? Barnaby Joyce battles vicious innuendo as coalition fears citizenship woe. Embattled Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce is in the grip of a deeply personal crisis that has now spilled into his public life at the very time he's fighting to save his political career. The popular national leader, who faces being kicked out of Parliament next week, 3 weeks ago he was kicked out, over his dual citizenship, has for months struggled with issues that have affected his marriage of 24 years. The personal drama has sent shivers of panic through the National Party and the Turnbull government. Senior figures are worried Mr. Joyce's private life could leave him vulnerable as opponents circle the story and prepare to use it against him should the looming High Court verdict on his citizenship result in a by-election. Already a long-term rival, Tony Windsor, there's Tony there, has published a series of provocative social media posts. The posts contain vicious innuendo about Mr. Joyce's private life. Mr. Joyce's personal life. The private turmoil has spilled over into his office, with staff leaving at the height of the situation. One of Mr. Joyce's female advisors left his office to work for another minister who is close to Mr. Joyce before moving to another MP. The National Party, on standby for a by-election in Mr. Joyce's safe Conservative seat of New England, is bracing for a dirty campaign to be unleashed against Mr. Joyce. Senior sources are fearful the tactic may weaken or even endanger the National leader's firm hold on northeast New South Wales seat, despite recent polling giving them confidence he will retain it. It would be ridiculous to say it isn't stressful. The matter has also come to the attention of senior members of the Liberal Party, all too aware of the crucial need to hold New England for Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull to maintain his one-seat grip on power. Mr. Joyce, a father of 4, declined to comment when contacted by the Saturday Telegraph. But in August, as he battled daily Labor taunts over his dual citizenship, he spoke of the mental and physical toll he was suffering. We now know his distress was compounded by the turmoil in his personal life and that Mr. Joyce has been under significant pressure. Quote, you stay awake at night, you wake up early in the morning and you are working things over in your mind as to how this happened, he said at the time. There's Barney. Of course it is stressful. It would be ridiculous to say it isn't stressful. A senior national source said there are concerns over a scandal in Mr. Joyce's personal life and a dirt file upsetting Conservative voters. Quote, this has come to light in the last few weeks as there's preparation underway for a by-election, the source said. The party is worried, concerned. You can't afford to lose a seat, even if it's New England, when there's a one-seat majority. And, of course, the rumours, if they are proved to be true, aren't going to help the retention of that seat. Another national source said Mr. Joyce's strategy was to ignore Mr. Windsor, but admitted it was worrying given the Conservative electorate. We don't want to get in the gutter with him. Barnaby can be the statesman here. Windsor is showing himself to be a bitter old bastard. You can see it in his tweets. He's angry, he said. Mr. Joyce, who was married in 1993, is a Catholic and has spoken often of his conservative social and economic values. The National Party has been putting in place contingency plans should Mr. Joyce be ruled ineligible, including organising for the Indigenous Affairs Minister, Nigel Scullion, to take over as parliamentary leader of the Nationals. Mr. Joyce was highly concerned during the 2016 federal election campaign about holding onto his seat with a vigorous campaign by the unions, left-wing activists GetUp and Mr. Windsor in his seat. In the end, his win was comfortable, with Mr. Joyce receiving 52% of the primary vote compared to Mr. Windsor's 29%. One Nation leader Pauline Hanson did not run a candidate in the seat last year, but will if a by-election is called. One Nation has confirmed they may not preference Mr. Joyce. Well, they've actually confirmed they're not even running here. In August, Mr. Joyce discovered that he held New Zealand citizenship by descent. Whoa-ho, Barneybaby, what have you been up to down there in Canberra? Does this mean that one of your painted secretaries has had to stop working in your office? Why for is that? Is it true that a painted secretary is building a 5th baby for Barnaby to go with the 4 that he has with his wife Natalie? Is this so? Is Barnaby Joyce a lowhound, a philanderer, an adulterous, loose dick on legs? Is that what Barnaby Joyce has been up to? Is this why he's not turning up to any campaign events? And of course there are people who are going to say, oh, but it's 2017, you can't bring somebody's personal life into their political career. Except when there's been a campaigner for the alleged moral majority, a family values candidate, a good, strong, hard Catholic, bolstering Tony Abbott and all his neo-conservative fantasies. Well, let's just see. Let's just see what other people have to say. Here we have the Independent Australia article titled Why Barnaby Joyce's Private Life is a Matter of Public Interest by Jennifer Wilson. Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce. Since MPs are responsible for legislation that intrudes into Australian bedrooms, their behaviour at a time when sexual exploitation is also under global scrutiny is definitely a matter of public interest, says Dr. Jennifer Wilson. The strong inference in this piece, Barnaby Joyce battles vicious innuendo as coalition fears citizenship woe, published in Daily Telegraph on Saturday, is that Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce conducted an illicit affair with a staffer in his office that has led to upheaval in his marriage and discontent in his workplace. The salacious details of Joyce's extramarital activities are of less relevance to the public than are the interesting reactions from some press gallery journalists into the outing of Joyce's private life. Okay, come on. move for me. I'll bugger the advertisement. It is not in the public interest. There is a convention that political private lives are left unexamined. That is, some are left unexamined, others are torn to shreds. So at the very least, the application of the convention is highly selective. And what politicians do in their private lives is nobody's business but their own. So are some of the observations made by those journalists who have, to my mind, inexplicably taken offence at the outing of Joyce. That was a fairly ambiguous paragraph. There are several aspects of this situation that are worthy of consideration. All of them make Joyce's personal choices matters of public interest, and the fact that they all seem to have escaped the notice of some of the press gallery is both astounding and concerning. Affairs between bosses and employees. It could be argued that these affairs never occur between equals, the power imbalance between, say, a Deputy Prime Minister and his staffer being such that the equality necessary for consent is absent. What is interesting is that journalists who freely discuss similar situations in other workplaces oppose exposing Barnaby and politicians in general. Why, one wonders, is Parliament House workplace exempt from scrutiny? It's naive to imagine the Australian political workplace is free from sexual shenanigans, so why is it afforded special protection by press gallery journalists? I don't recall journalists refraining from publishing details of the affair between Tim Warner of 7 West Media and his employee Amber Harrison. Nobody was overly concerned about protecting either party's privacy in this boss and employee imbroglio. Yet for reasons that are difficult to understand, such protections are assumed by convention to be a politician's right. Privacy would appear to be a somewhat fluid concept used by some journalists to withhold important information from the voting public. This bias is, without a doubt, a matter of public interest. Heterosexual marriage is the sacred foundation of society. Joyce is an ardent no voter in the current marriage equality opinion poll. He has even bizarrely claimed that marriage equality will, in some yet undefined manner, deny his 4 daughters their inalienable right to a heterosexual marriage. We know that the best protection for those girls is that they get themselves into a secure relationship with a loving husband, and I want that to happen for them. I don't want any legislator to take away that right from me. Joyce used his 4 daughters' inalienable right to a heterosexual marriage as an argument against marriage equality. This in itself makes no sense, but it does demonstrate his hypocrisy in advocating, quote, a secure relationship with a loving husband as a woman's ultimate, quote, protection. I doubt his wife or his daughters feel particularly protected by the man who has brought such unwelcome attention to their lives through his own alleged infidelity. Unfortunately, heterosexuality is no guarantee of fidelity, as Joyce has allegedly demonstrated. He has failed to provide for his wife and daughters that which he insists not he, but marriage equality will deny them. Joyce is the Deputy and sometimes acting Prime Minister of Australia. He is a public figure of considerable influence. He appears to be shifting responsibility for the fouling of heterosexual marriage onto LGBTQI people, while himself, it seems, betraying his family in what he perceives to be the sacred foundation of society. This is a matter of public interest. How could any good journalist consider it otherwise? The Weinstein effect. As has been most recently demonstrated by the speaking out of innumerable Hollywood actresses sexually assaulted by powerful film mogul Harvey Weinstein, the only way men can continue predatory sexual behaviour is through their dependence on the silence of others. In principle, every journalist who knows of the predatory sexual behaviour of politicians and seeking a sexual affair with your employees is predatory behaviour, given the power imbalance, is enabling that behaviour. Wow. The private lives argument is, quite frankly, bullshit and used to justify a cowardly silence. Once a politician embarks on an illicit affair with an employee, he or she no longer has the right to a private life. It is a relationship of such inequality that questions must arise and must be addressed as to the consensuality of the engagement and who will most likely bear the often drastic consequences when the affair is discovered ended. Politicians should not be left alone to sexually exploit subordinates, and nobody should call them to account. This is exactly how Weinstein's happen. But many journalists fail to see this, given the current climate is alarming. Not only is the politicians' behaviour a matter of public interest, so in this instance is the journalists. An MP's private life is not sacrosanct. Indeed, as they are responsible for legislation that all too frequently intrudes into the bedrooms of Australian citizens, they are even more accountable to the public than CEOs whose philandering temporarily affects share prices. What the Joyce affair has immediately brought to our attention is the willingness of some press gallery journalists to continue to protect MPs at a time when sexual behaviour in the workplace and the appalling sexual exploitation of employees by the powerful is under intense global scrutiny in all workplaces, it would seem, except the Australian Parliament. This exemption for MPs, this exceptionalism, ought in itself to be a matter of grave public concern, and one can only wonder what else do some journalists decide is not in our interest to know, and why. There you go. Now you know. If you want to know more, Google Barnaby Joyce affair. Baubles on a lot YouTube. Ciao.